On this week's show, Georgia Southern basketball on the road. We'll give you updates on how things are going. And we also had a chance to talk with head football coach Chad Lunsford and defensive coordinator Scot Sloan. All that and more as we welcome you inside the Eagles' Nest. Welcome inside the Eagles' Nest. I'm Josh Aubrey, being joined by Mike Anthony, sports editor and Georgia Southern beat writer for the Statesboro Herald. And Mike, Georgia Southern men's basketball continues to roll right along. They've had a couple of close games, but for the most part, they've been keeping things going there in the Sun Belt Conference. They go on the road, knock off Coastal, who I thought would probably be the tougher of the two, beat them fairly handily, and then had to eke out a win at App. The women lose both. Your thoughts on where the basketball teams are right now?
Well, I know we emphasized it last week, but in this conference this year, it seems like being able to get wins on the road is going to be vital. You always want to protect your home court, but everybody's been able to do that for the most part in the Sun Belt. Georgia Southern, one of only a couple of teams with more than one road win. They're now 3-1 on the road. That's big for them, especially because they've been on the road more than they've been at home. They've got one more coming up this weekend at Georgia State. After that, they'll have 11 conference games left. 7 of those will be at home where they haven't lost yet. At Hanner, always a tough place for anyone to play. So if Georgia Southern can go and get one more on the road, that would put them at 6-1 and put them right in contention to be there at the end at the top of the standings and really have them with a lot of momentum with a lot of home games left. As for the ladies, they're in the same boat in terms of having a bunch of home games coming up on the schedule. However, they've dug themselves into a pretty deep hole right now, still looking for their first win in conference play. Last weekend, kind of the same as the weekend before, one game where they're in the game, finding a few points, and another one this time Saturday at Appalachian State where they didn't play a bad game, but they ran into a buzzsaw. Appalachian State started the season poorly, but they've really come on. They were hitting all of their shots and just overwhelmed the Georgia Southern women. So they've got a long way to go to catch up. The guys with a win this week could really go a long way to extending some of the lead over the other teams who are spinning their wheels a bit.
Well, the ladies losing to an App State team that only won 5 games all season, lost by 30. That's a pretty tough one for them. Hopefully, like you said, they can maybe rebound back when they get that long home stretch coming in. As for the guys, let's go out and take a look at some of the highlights against Coastal. Thursday night action, Georgia Southern on the road at Coastal Carolina. The Chanticleers coming out to an early lead. Jalen Shaw, 2 of his 21 points in the game. Later, the Eagles respond. Ike Smith drops in 3 of his 19 for Georgia Southern. Back comes Coastal. Artur Labinowitz with the layup. Later, it's Demario Beck. The nice pass goes in the paint for the layup. The Eagles coming right back. Tukey Brown, the nice dish to Monte Glenn, who'd finished with 19 points. Tukey with 22 in the game. Later, it's Ike Smith backing down, going in strong for the layup. Coastal tries to fight back, but it wouldn't be enough, though, as Georgia Southern comes back to take this one and win by a final count of 77-66. So next up for the Eagles on the road at Georgia State coming up Saturday. No Thursday game this week, and then they return home for 2 games the following week. All right, Mike, well, some football news. The Georgia Southern football team and head coach Chad Lunsford finally closed out the books on the assistant coaches. We know who they all are right now. Anything in particular catch your eye when they finally have, when you look at the total 6 new coaches this year?
Well, I know, we had gone back and forth wondering how much change there was going to be. Obviously, the 2 coordinator spots came open early. They were filled early. I think that there may have been a bunch of meetings there as to how much they could keep, how much they liked what was on the current coaching staff. There were some coaches from last year that hung around for a little bit, did a little more recruiting, but in the end, they also are on their way out the door. I think that for those guys, it may have been an issue of it's not that they didn't think they could work together, that Lunsford wasn't pleased with them, but with two new systems coming in, with two guys who you want to throw your trust and support in running a defense and an offense, sometimes they've got to have guys that they know or that they've worked with, or sometimes just coaching new positions that they trust a little more to fit in and get things going right away.
Well, the bigger turnover was on the defensive side of the ball, where Scot Sloan takes over as coordinator, and we had a chance to talk with him this week. We're going to hear from him in just a moment, but your thoughts on him having gotten your first opportunity to talk to him?
Well, Coach Sloan, he certainly seems to be comfortable with the task he's been given. Maybe some reason for that is because he's another guy who's been at Georgia Southern before. His second stint around, he's been here. He knows the culture. He mentioned that he knows, what he's stepping into, and that this fan base, this team expects to win. He definitely, I would say that he's got the bigger task of the two coordinators in that he's totally changing the scheme, going from a 4-3 to a 3-4. It's a lot more complicated than just taking a lineman off the line and moving them to a linebacker position. A lot more techniques, different sizes and shapes and responsibilities for a lot of guys on the field, but he did seem encouraged that there's a lot of youth, a lot of raw talent to work with. So we'll have to see in the weight room and on the playbook, the X's and O's, how things change throughout the off season here and going into spring. But I think that he is going to be the right guy for the job. I mean, he definitely has experience with Georgia Southern, not only coaching for them, but also against them at App State, and he certainly seemed to do a good job there. Any Eagle offensive player would be able to tell you that over the last couple of seasons.
And also known for his recruiting. He's come in here and gotten former Georgia Southern players, kids to go to App State. He's gotten former Eagle players that are coaching now to have their kids go to App State as well. So it seems like it would be an easy job for him to bring them over to Georgia Southern as well. We talked to Chad Lunsford about the coaching staff and recruiting, and we also had a chance to talk with Coach Sloan about his philosophies on defense and recruiting as well.
Anybody that I interviewed and that we put a lot of time in trying to figure out the fit here, we talked about work ethic. We talked about, Georgia Southern's a special place because of where it came from and where, it started from nothing really, and being able to build it and come up to where it is now. I wanted to make sure the guys understood the tradition of the place, and I think this whole staff understands that. And we were able the other night to have a meal with our guys when they got back, an occasional meal with them. And, I just watched our coaches get around the kids, being servant leaders. And that was something that was very important to me. But the makeup of the staff, there's different personalities, there's different strengths, different weaknesses. I think we can play off one another to have the best staff in the country.
You've been here with some coaching staffs where things didn't seem like everyone was on the same page, and you've been on some that have. Did you learn some things, both good and bad?
Definitely. I think the culture that you try to build with your team, it has to come from the top down with your coaching staff, and you got to be practicing what you preach. So all the stuff that I tell our guys and our core values and our things that we believe in around here, it was very important to me that our coaches believed in the same things. So, that was part of the interview process also. And, being around different styles, different deals of way we built staffs around here, it was just very important to me that we were all on the same page and we were, doing the things that we're going to ask our kids to do.
So now an important couple weeks coming up with signing day, the traditional February signing day. This staff don't have long again to get on the road and solidify and finish up the signing class here.
Yeah, we got 8 guys at the mid-year signing point, and we've got a few more spots there. We've talked about signing close to 23. But again, we're not gonna just take anybody. We're gonna make sure that we go get good players that are the right fit. And if that means we may end up saving a few spots for down the road, we can do that. We've got some kids on our team currently that deserve scholarships. There's some guys that can play that can contribute to us, you know, so I got to look at those kind of things. But we're going to go get the right guys. We're going to go get good players. I feel really good about the 8 guys we signed at mid-year, and I feel really good about where we're at with current guys that we're recruiting. So you may see a class as high as 23. You may see it at 18 or 20, just kind of depending on if it fits us or not. But we got a lot of great recruiters on this staff, and we got guys that have great connections with guys already. We have great connections in the state of Georgia. And, you know, so we're going to put everything we got into it to go put a great class together.
Coach, you mentioned that the coaches that have some guys already. You've got 6 new coaches. They may have been recruiting some guys who weren't signed in the early signing period. I know it's got to be a tricky situation, a touchy situation, to maybe have some of those guys come to Georgia Southern. How much do you encourage your new coaches, hey, you look at this guy that you guys are supposed to be bringing to App, to wherever. Can you get them to come to Georgia Southern? And what if they say, I don't feel comfortable about that? Or how do you walk that line?
Well, there's some unwritten rules and ethics involved in recruiting. And I would never put a coach in a situation where he felt like, you know, he's being unethical as far as going to recruit a guy. But, you know, if a guy's not committed to a university, and one of our coaches already has a relationship with the kid, there's nothing wrong with going and recruiting that kid, you know. So depending on the situation, I think you got to take it case by case. But I would never ask a coach to do something that he felt like was unethical in those type of situations. And you know, what goes around comes around too. And you know, you want to be very smart about how you handle things. You never want to burn bridges and all that kind of stuff. But we're going to do right. We're going to do right. But yes, if they were already recruiting them and they were not committed to other schools, in my opinion, they're fair game.
It's great excitement for me and my family. Opportunity to be back with Coach Lunsford. He and I have a lot of history together. Actually worked together, I think, 9 years at 3 different places. And my older son was actually his ring bearer in his wedding. So a lot of friendship, a lot of trust, a lot of respect, I think, on each part. And the opportunity to be here at a place where, you know, football is important, a lot of tradition, a great fan base is exciting, you know, for me. And then, of course, the opportunity to coordinate is a big thing, a big responsibility, and certainly something that I'm excited about.
Staff is now in place. What can you say about the staff and the guys you'll be working around and working alongside?
Very excited about the staff as it came together. You know, got history and past experience with them, which is important. I think our cohesiveness, our culture that we build as a staff is going to be one that will bleed into our players. And I think it's where it starts, is up here in our staff room and in our halls, the way we work together as coaches. And then that certainly trickles down, and our players will see it, they'll feel it, and they'll feed off of it, and then they'll build their own culture based on the precedent that we set as a staff.
Coach talked a lot about coaching chemistry.
Mm-hmm.
Can you expound on that? How important is the chemistry among the coaches?
I think it's critical, because that's where it all starts. You know, when we enjoy working together, enjoy our relationships professionally and personally, you know, spending time away from the game as coaching staff, at each other's house, cooking out, things like that. But then also the mutual respect that we all bring to a staff table as we're sitting around putting together a game plan. I think that's where it all starts. And if you don't have that within the staff, then I don't think the players have a chance, because they see right through it. They can feel it, they can sense it, and it definitely creates challenges on down into the locker room.
There's a big headline a couple weeks ago announcing that Georgia Southern will go to a 3-4 from a 4-3. I know that, you know, a lot of guys coming back with some talent, and they, you know, have some fundamentals, but definitely some different tactics. How much of it is, you know, what they need to do physically different? How much is going to be in the film room what they need to do differently technique-wise? Yeah,
a lot of it is, you know, and I'm meeting with each player one-on-one right now. We had a team meeting Sunday night, and then I met with the entire defense and kind of gave them an overview of everything. But then I'm scheduling each one of them for about a 15-minute meeting, and sitting down with them individually and just talking to them on a personal basis as far as them as individuals. You know, the biggest thing is I've talked to them is to be open-minded and flexible. It's going to be a fluid thing. You know, our job as coaches is to identify their best skill set and find out where it fits exactly in the scheme. And it may be that after 5 practices at one position, you know, you bring a guy in, sit him down in the office and say, hey, let's look at you over at this spot and see if it fits your skill set a little bit better. Then we get a lot of stuff on film that we can evaluate, we can go back and critique. Because I reminded all of them in these meetings that, you know, we don't play this week and we don't play next week. You know, we've got from now to September to put this thing together, and it's going to be a process. You know, and Coach Lunsford has talked to the team about embracing that process, and each day closing the gap. You know, I've told many of them there's a gap between where we are right now and where we want to be, but as long as each day we work to close that gap on and off the field, then we'll get it accomplished. But it's not going to happen overnight. But certainly there's a great skill set of players here. You know, when I watch the film, I mean, there's guys that can run, that can hit, they're explosive. You know, so really the thing right now is just getting them in the right positions and them being open-minded and flexible to understand any type of suggestions or move we talk about is going to be with their best interest at heart, and that's to get them on the field early and often.
You've had a lot of success around this area coaching. You've taken players away from Ware County, bringing them to App State and things like that. Do you feel like that's a big strength of yours? And do you think that those relationships will only grow now that you're at Georgia Southern? Because you've been able to take former players, children, and bring them to App State. You brought, you know, former players to App State. I can only imagine that it would be easier to bring them here.
We hope so, and I do believe that recruiting is about relationships, you know, and really, you know, targeting the areas that you have great relationships, great ties in. So I do hope that, you know, my relationships with high school coaches is going to be one that will continue to create strong recruiting trends, and certainly keep those guys here in state and keep them at home rather than them choosing to leave and go somewhere else out of state.
Hey, Miss Thompson, everything's fine. It's going to be no problem. I'll have you done in a few minutes.
My name is Paisley Nordhoff, part owner of Complete Car Care, and I want you to come see me.
So the next big signing day for Georgia Southern is coming up in about 3 weeks on February 7th, I believe. So I guess we'll find out more about the class.
Yeah, it's kind of a weird period now because there's a lot of action going on. Coaches, you'll be hard-pressed to find them in town unless they're coming home for a hot meal or to maybe get a new round of clean clothes, because they are feet on the streets. They're traveling around to high schools. I know a little tougher than usual with Atlanta all of a sudden becoming the frozen tundra up there. Schools canceled, making it harder to get those meetings in, but that's what it's all about these next couple of weeks. So the coaches are busy. As for our side, it's more speculation. Coaches really not allowed to talk too much about who they're recruiting or the specifics of what they're telling them, but it'll all turn into that party that we see every year. Early morning, fax machines, beeping, whirring, buzzing. Everybody gets to remember what a fax machine is. So that'll be a big day in a few weeks. But for now, kind of behind the curtain, but you know that those guys are all working hard.
All right, well, that'll wrap things up for now. For Mike Anthony, I'm Josh Aubrey. We thank you for joining us. Hope to see you again next week.